Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is all over the place. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness isn't strictly speaking a Doctor Strange film. Sure, Benedict Cumberbatch appears in it, in many roles as Doctor Strange. Hello, and thanks for visiting our YouTube channel. Here's everything you need to know about the movie Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. But before we start our video, don't forget to hit the bell icon and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The new Marvel Cinematic Universe film, however, is focused on Elizabeth Olsen Wanda Maximoff and her grief at the loss of her children in WandaVision. Scarlet Witch might have been a better choice if a character's name had to be in the title. However, everyone involved, including director Sam Raimi, writer Michael Waldron, Loki, Cumberbatch, and Rachel McAdams, who plays Strange's former girlfriend Christine Palmer, tries their hardest to create something genuine and contribute to Strange's emotional story. But there is no way to believe anything between Strange and Palmer because McAdams' presence in the first Doctor Strange film was regarded as an afterthought. On Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Waldron's big concept for Strange is to ask if he is happy. Although the former Sorcerer Supreme has rescued the world on several occasions, it has come to a terrible cost. Of course, Maximoff has had to make greater sacrifices, as anybody who has seen the WandaVision or earlier MCU films starring Olsen knows. WandaVision is mandatory watching, but it does help you comprehend Maximoff's current state of mind and how her storyline seems semi-recent in certain ways. The new Marvel film shows secret dimensions to what was supposed to be Maximoff's moment of closure and future path. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, on the other hand, has a lot more in his mind. The word multiverse is actually in the title. The new Doctor Strange movie's multiverse strategy relies on the shocking us with different versions of the film we know and beyond. Without nostalgia hook that allowed Spider-Man No Way Home to bring back famous characters. There are a lot of big cameos here, both expected and surprising, and we are sure not everyone will like how they're handled. It effectively indicates that only the MCU's main dimension, ultimately named Earth 616 on Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, is important, with all the other Earth existing to serve it. To take a word from the film, some may call it a degradation of reality. But it's exactly the kind of thing a former Rick and Morty writer, in this case Waldron, would come up with. You can literally do anything now, since the MCU is made up of limitless universe, with as many variations and takes on characters as they are. Assuming you have the cash, which Disney and Marvel Studios have enough of, it also helped that there are many of Hollywood celebrities that are ready to join the MCU. Almost every cameo in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is a long joke. It's pandering, but it's also willing to laugh at their expense, which is in keeping with previous installments. Marvel Studios has been teasing us throughout the Phase 4 of the MCU, with Ewan Peters' appearance on the WandaVision as Pietro Maximoff's proving to be false herring, and Vincent D'Onofrio reprising his role as Wilson Fisk, Kingpin from the Daredevil and Hawkeye, only to be murdered off. Waldron isn't the only one who has been set wild in a multi-universe where everything is possible. Raimi's Spider-Man universe had a more grounded look, which is now sought up and retrospectively related to the MCU, but there are basically no boundaries here. The 62-year-old filmmaker rises beyond Waldron's 35-year-old character arcs and fan services issues, pushing the MCU into the areas it has previously avoided. Doctor Strange in the Multi-Universe of the Madness is nasty, violent, terrifying, and bizarre at different points. It's bold and willing to go further than ever before into the mythos and visual techniques of some Doctor Strange comics. At least one jump scare is included. There are a few body horror scenes in the film, the most notable of which sees Olsen squeezing herself out of a mirror, limbs and legs all twisted and out of position, until she straightens herself out. We're curious how blissfully clueless parents will react to them when their children bring them to the movies to see that new Marvel movie. And early on in Doctor Strange and the Multi-Universe of Madness, Strange and another character journey through several realities, including an animated one and one where everyone is painted. Raimi, like Scott Derrickson on Doctor Strange before him, finds ways to keep the action moving. The highlight is a combat that ingeniously and refreshingly riffs on the background music. On the whole, we think the first film was more imaginative, but it helped that we were witnessing the masters of the mystic arts of the first time. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse Madness picks up after events of No Way Home, with Strange meeting young America Chavez Zucchelli Gomez from Netflix The Babysitters Club, who reveals she can accidentally travel between worlds, that everyone wants her power. Strange then embarks on interdimensional odyssey to defend her from those who wish to harm her. Chavez is more of a MacGuffin than a character. As a result, Chavez lacks her own narrative. Her growth at the conclusion feels forced, and the only true lesson she can take away from the Doctor Strange and the Multiverse Madness is that adult superheroes are largely horrible. That may be construed as the new Marvel film's theme in various ways, that the heroes of the MCU are always a step or two away from going insane, that the abilities they have are far too great for them, and that they shouldn't be trusted with them. Tony Stark, Iron Man, was correct, as Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness demonstrates. With the incorrect training, some of these heroes are so powerful that it's hard for those others to hold them in control. Of course, there are major drawbacks with the regulation. Institutions can be corrupted as well, as Captain America, the Winter Soldier demonstrated, but in a world where strange powers abound and seismic catastrophes are common, perhaps some top-up regulation is necessary. On Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, however, these concepts are never mentioned, let alone addressed. That is regrettable, more so because Strange is a significant part of the discourse, following his reckless behavior in No Way Home, when a sorcerer with so much power neglected to ask simple questions before delivering a teenager his brainwashed desire, which was hilarious. In the Multiverse of Madness, Doctor Strange suggested that he would be met by his more evil counterparts who had lost the plane, and there are hints throughout the film about how Doctor Strange is the biggest threat to the multi-universe, but they appear to be leftovers from an earlier version of the film. Marvel, it turns out, lied about the plot, because the movie is about something completely different. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness thus overturns the conclusion of the last Doctor Strange film. Entire characters are forgotten, even those who were supposed to play a key part in the sequel based on the original setup. We are not sure if this contributed to the Derrickson's creative differences, given he left half a year after the picture was announced. Doctor Strange has been a constantly evolving beast in the multi-universe of madness. Due to changing Marvel timelines and in response to Loki, No Way Home, and test screenings, the film has allegedly undergone significant changes. Raimi appeared on ad option when Marvel hired him because he had only made 2 films in the 15 years since completing his Spider-Man trilogy in 2007. But as the creator of the Evil Dead trilogy, Raimi was not only entrenched in horror, which Marvel sought for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, but he might be said to be the father of superhero cinema. Though others would build on the genre's reputation, Raimi established the foundation for the MCU and superheroes' present dominance in pop culture. Raimi delivers what is, in some ways, Marvel's widest film in years in the Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Raimi can't disguise its shortcomings, despite its wackiness. After all, he is still operating inside a system, while the multiverse in the film allows for infinite possibilities. The MCU does not. Everything is in the best interest of the Disney and Marvel studios, despite having complete control of the writing, which allows Raimi to imprint his own mark on the film. Waldron fails to make much progress for the Cumberbatch title character. He is experimenting with some powerful weapons such as fate, parenting, and the quest of perfection and idealism. However, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of the Madness repeatedly trips over itself due to the lack of depth in the subject matter. It seems like a live-action Rick and Morty episode or an episode from the Marvel's lackluster cartoon What If, stretched out over 2 hours and costing $200 million. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness loses sight of the fact that great stories are ultimately about people and their connection. You may use much CGI and as many hilarious cameos as you like to entertain the audience. However, if your character does not embark on a meaningful journey, it will never be more than a popcorn movie. Thank you for watching. We hope you liked the video. In the comment box below, please share your thoughts on the film. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well.